All right. Hello, everyone who's out there in the internet world. This is me once again. My name is Yacir Ortega, and this series of videos, I guess, are about my experience with ADHD, my questions, my comments, from a very personal experience, but also from I guess, researcher experience with this mindset, or this researcher had always questioning and asking questions about the reasons why one things are and the other, etc. So, as you might know from the previous video, I have ADHD. I was diagnosed ADHD late in life, meaning in my adult life. Um, and then when I got the diagnosis, sort of it explained many things and that I have been going through my life for a while, and that's why now I am like, okay, well, now that makes sense. And then as I go through the diagnosis, as I go through um the characteristics of what it means to have ADHD, I was like, oh, now it makes totally sense. And that sort of like was a relief to me, uh liberation to me. So it gets me like the wow, this is a new thing for me. And also got me thinking how I can explore this area furthermore into who I am, my identity, but also can this be taken to the academic world, to the research world. And as some of you might know, I try to connect who I am, my identity, my personal experiences with my research. And I think for me, as a researcher, it's important for me to make that connection between research and my lived experiences. And this is something that I'm trying to do right now, how to connect these dots to advance my career, my academic journey as well, from a personal experience to understand what is going out there. So when I got the diagnosis about ADHD, there were some words or vocabulary that comes with it, and then I need to learn, and I've been trying to learn for a while. And several words came throughout this exploration, and I'm gonna share with you these words and what I thought and what I think somehow they mean, without putting any academic or empirical mindset yet. So I think the first word that came out of all of this was the idea of disorder. Disorder. ADHD is a disorder. That's the first thing that comes and pops up in whatever the literature. So some of you might or might know I'm coming from Colombia. That's my background. My roots are in Colombia, and Spanish is my first language. So disorder um, translate roughly to desorganización. So meaning disorganization of things, right? Whereas in English, it sounds like really more medical disorder, like something is not in the right order, right? So it got me thinking that it looks like in life there is an order when it comes to brain function. And so again, this idea of something is out of order. So it looks that for some reason the system in itself has said that there is an order to things, and an order, I'm assuming that is A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There is an order. And then folks like me who have ADHD and other things are out of this order, right? So that's the first thing that came to my mind. It looks like I am out of order. My mind, my brain is out of this order. And the literature keeps coming back to this idea of disorder, disorder, disorder. So one thing is that the second portion of this idea of conceptualization of the ADHD is mental health disorder. So there is an order of things, okay? So now there is a mental health disorder, meaning the way my mental health is not in line with the order that is supposed to be for society, okay? Um, most of the literature talks about mental disorder, and I like some others talk about mental health disorder. Some other talks about developmental disorder. So in a sense, the brain has a quote unquote natural way of developing from birth, child, teenager, adult. There is like a quote unquote normal way of developing. And for some of us with ADHD, it looks like there is a disorder of the way this development has been put together, right? And the other thing that I also try to do is to look it up, these concepts from the Spanish version of ADHD, and what it comes is trastorno. And for me, the word trastorno, again, all of these words sound so medicalized, like trastorno for me, and very naive and ignorant person sounds to me like you way drink too much and now you're like, whoa, whoa, trastorno. Or that you're walking in the street and suddenly you faint and then, oh, she had or he had a trastorno, right? So still don't understand what the trastorno means. It still means something that is distorted and is strange and weird to their normality. So the first things about these conceptualizations are about uh, being outside the norm, hence the binary neurodivergent, neurotypical, right? So it looks like the neurotypical is aligned in this development, in this mental way of doing things, in how your mental conditions are done. There's a certain condition and naturality of things, and then we who are coming with a different way of how the brain works, then it is neurodivergent versus neurotypical. So imagine these binaries for now, how this work. Then the second thing that I wanted to mention also is, as I go through the literature, is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition. So it's like an official North American Western canon that actually are the ones to say what it's supposed to be within these categories of mental health issues, ADHD, spectrum, and you name it, right? So this DSM-MD, or Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, are the ones to classify and explain the characteristics of the different human beings and how their brains developed. And then folks from the global south have taken this and made a corresponding translation of what all this means, of these categorizations, right? And the first thing that it is categorized is in the idea of inattentiveness, hyperactivity, and impulsiveness. So before me before me being diagnosed with ADHD, you imagine the little child who is in the classroom running around the class, just running around and being inattentive, or hyperactive that moves all the time in the seats and is fidgeting all the time, like oh, like this, and it's impulse that doesn't control his body or her body. And why not? So those are the mental images that I had, and many folks out there might have, of this idea of inattentiveness, hyperactivity, and impulsiveness, right? But little by little, we are getting into the idea of what really is for me, right? And then another sort of variant or variation, or I guess um, stem or direction of within ADHD, they talk about that it is a condition. And I like the idea of condition because it's not as, it doesn't sound to me as medical as disorder, right? Or as a trastorno. So the condition, and then I was looking it up, and well, what is the condition? Well, it is a condition that affects the executive functions. And then I was like, okay, but what are the executive functions? And it says that it's a set of mental processes that helps people like me control, and keep in mind this idea of control, and coordinate their thoughts and actions to achieve certain goals, right? So that's another thing that I've been thinking about, the idea of controlling and control your thoughts, your ideas, and mental processes. So in a sense, it looks like all of this is about controlling and put your brain into these boundaries. It's like there is a like a little path that the brain should go normally through this path, and because some have deviate from that path, then you're all of a sudden neurodivergent. That's why neurodivergent, you just diverge from that path. And then what we have with ADHD is that problem or condition of executive functions such as planning, creating plans, estimating how long will take from point A to point B, focusing or paying attention, organizing, keep things organized, working memory, being able to control ourselves in different ways, like even emotions, right? Problem solving, adapting to new situations, and decision making. And when I was reading this, and it reminded me to the the test or the diagnosis test that I did a while back to get the ADHD diagnosis. And in a sense, I remember I had a hard time with all of these questions about planning and focusing and organizing and working memory. And I was like all the time thinking, why is it that I have problems with working memory? But I guess in other videos, I will give you examples and detail of each one of these ones and how they have been through my life. But I guess moving on to the symptoms and what the diagnosis and statistical manual of mental illness, they talk about the symptoms, right? Like if you have a condition for executive function conditions, then there are certain things that put you in the category of neurodivergent versus neurotypical. And there are some symptoms, and according to the manual, is roughly symptoms that include inattention, such as difficulty paying attention to details, making careless mistakes, having trouble focusing on tasks, not listening when spoken to, not following instructions, losing things, being easily distracted, being forgetful. There are so many things to name. Like I said, through these videos, I will probably go deeper into each one of these categories and give you examples of my own life. Also, avoiding tasks that require mental effort, having difficulty organizing tasks, hyperactivity and impulsivity, such as fidgeting, leaving their seat, running around and climbing excessively, blurting out answers before questioning, are completed, interrupting and intruding on others. And it got me thinking that my talk for today is about this particular part of hyperactivity and impulsivity. Because according to the literature, this hyperactivity and impulsivity, especially in adults, does not show in the way we think it is, the little child moving around and fidgeting and moving the fingers and going around and things like that. For some of us, this hyperactivity and impulsivity are within the brain and you don't see it. That's why a lot of people don't know that we or people like me have this ADHD diagnosis because we mask these behaviors because all of these things are inside and nobody knows, right? And we'll come back to the idea of masking at some point in the future. But for now, I want to speak specifically about hyperactivity and impulsivity within the brain for me. And that for me is mainly internal and how it has been reflected in my life, but how I have been able to exercise this mental hyperactivity through art. Okay, so the second part of this video, it's about how I have been able to cope or this mental hyperactivity and impulsivity through different types of art. And I'm now exploring these things because I never knew about it. But now it makes sense that why just see have so many outlets. And I will share with you in a minute. But now makes sense. It is because I have ADHD. It is because my hyperactivity and impulsivity does not reflect physically in the out world, but it's in my mind and it is sort of channeled through art. And then we'll be talking about art, more details in a minute about how I do it. So my diagnosis helped me understand why I have so many personal projects within the arts. So today I will be speaking about three major things that I do. I mean, that I have been doing for like 30 plus years of my life: poetry, music, and art. And when I mean art, I mean like painting or drawing, these kinds of things, right? And something that I learned is that art could be, and it is for me, beneficial in many different ways. Why? Because it has helped me to focus um, and improve my hyper focus into a specific project. Unfortunately, as you might know, with ADHD, sometimes there are unfinished projects, and I will show you in a minute. So art with for ADHD also can help us to release or relieve stress and anxiety. And one of the most important ones is about how to channel the emotions and the expressions through art to express myself in ways that sometimes have been difficult to put into words. And some of you might know that ADHD, of those folks with ADHD, have difficulty with words, meaning print text or reading, things like that, that we can go in depth more into that. But also art can be beneficial for people like me to help us center somehow ourselves in a moment by using different parts of the body, our thoughts, our emotions simultaneously. You know, when you write poetry, when creating music, when engaging with performance and drama acts and scribbling, painting, etc., 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 etc. So it has always been therapeutic to me um, because I can do these things with the safety of my home. Um, and it has, in a sense, for me, in the past 30 plus years, and now that I have the diagnosis, it has helped me to heal, in a sense. Art has always also been a way to exercise risk-taking behaviors, because instead of going out and do stuff in the world. You can do things through art or take risks through art. And the last thing that is related to me is about the intense focus on things that I am interested in. For example, this video series is part of that. Like, I'm so intense and so into creating these videos that I don't mind spending 1 hour of my life on Sundays to talk to you, um, who are there listening and watching this video. I don't know how many of you get the chance to see it, but it's not about getting an audience or getting millions of views and likes. It's more about this exercise within this particular art form of creating a video that helps me with my creative mindset and exercise their hyper focus into this video, right? So one thing that I wanted to mention before I show you examples of how this art is being done in my life. In the first video, I mentioned in the Genesis video of how everything is started, and I mentioned my colleague sort of helping me out. I also want to mention that the colleague is not necessarily a colleague, but it's also a very close friend, a person who has been with me since day one, supporting me, listening to me, and engaging with conversation about this particular topic and other topics. So I think it's important also to mention that the colleague that I mentioned in the first video is not only a colleague, it is a very close friend. And as you know, I am a researcher, and when we do research, we do this idea of confidentiality, anonymity, and why not. So that's why I don't want to say names, because I want to protect their identities. And I guess if my friend, colleague is listening to this at some point, and if he wants to say something, there is the option, the comments below, to say something if you want to. So I want to open the space for my friend to engage with this video and others if you want to. That's an option. And also for anybody who wants to make any comments on the comments box below, you can do so. All right. So now, following up on this idea of how I have been able to exercise. I like this word exercise. It's like you're possessed and you're like, exercising, as opposed to exercising this mental disorder, this trastorno, or this condition through art. I guess the genesis of all of this art. I remember when I was young, probably teens, I guess. I mean, I have always been engaged in any type of drawing and doodling and humming and making, like all types of different types of art, just because why not, right? And one of the things that I learned through all of these ways of doing this is how it has helped me a lot to sort of cope with the pain, the internal suffering that I have experienced since teenage years. I remember clearly. And one of the first things that I want to share with you is that um, I have been engaging with for a long time is with creating poetry. And I remember back in the day creating poetry, writing on notebooks, reading both North American poets, but also reading some of the Latin American poets. There is this movement in Latin America. I believe it was born in Colombia, but I may be wrong. The Nadaist movement, and the Nadaist movement comes from the Dadaist. And nada in Spanish, in English, means nothing. So it mine is a movement about the nothingness of things, and or that everything could be art in a sense. And I took that. I guess I can write any type of things on poetry, and I started writing on pieces of paper, notebooks, etc. And I would share with friends, like, hey, I made a poem for you, I made a poem for you, and why not? And so, yes, I've been doing poetry for a while, and I've been recording poetry as a way to exercise this um, ADHD, I guess, for a while, right? And guess what? So I've been documenting my poetry through many different ways that I will show you in a minute. But something that you will hear throughout this presentation today is the idea of experimental. So it looks like I've been experimenting all my life, but I'll tell you now, it makes sense now that I'm just thinking this. When I told you earlier that we have this condition and ADHD people are outside this condition, so in a sense it looks like I always wanted to be outside of those conditions or all of those patterns that I guess society or what somebody said the brain should function in this way. I wanted to step away from that. So that's why the idea of experimental something came into be since teenage years till today. Experimenting with words, experimenting with poetry. You might find out there tons of poems. Um, but I guess I wanted to share with you a few examples of what I mean by poetry and experimental poetry. Um, because why not? So I'll show you one example that I recently about blackout poetry, and then I'll circle back to other examples of poetry really quick. I guess this video is gonna be a little bit longer today because I'm excited about showing you this from the ashes. Um, this poem was done based on a rejection letter for um for an article that I was going to publish. So I took the letter and I blacked it out and I created a poem based on this. And you can see the erratic ways of moving back and forth with these arrows and points. And and I like it. It's beautiful, in which I turned something that is negative into something that is positive for me and healing. So you start here and it says, I wish all high particular engagement to better relevant interests at the bottom of hope, you will find language more constructive, consider, feel it elsewhere, right? And this is just like two examples. One of how I want to get out of that normality of what it means to create a poem, but also the hyperactivity or the impulsivity channel through this poem, right? And I believe I have another poem that I want to share with you. Here it is. Um, it's sort of the same idea. I don't necessarily remember the background of this one, but you can see that I'm trying to step out of the box here. Let's see how it works. I don't remember how it starts. And if you know, try to follow because I don't remember. By British people, trust self-destruction will also not allow a large majority that still ask ideas three with. Europe with three ideas asked to seal that a large majority will also not allow self-destruction trash by British people. So this is just an experiment. As you can see, I'm experimenting and I have been doing this um, since I've been a child, these type of ideas. And I'll show you in a moment another example of a book that I've been working on as well. that I go to a thrift store and then I buy books like secondhand books, like probably for £1 or whatever, $1, and then I use them and I cross them out and I try to come out with some ideas for that, and I'll show them to you like in a minute and how this works. So let me share the screen with you. Another example of how I exercise my creativity right here. So this is a book that I got, and then I'm trying to do the same things that I showed you earlier, right? And this is number one. I believe I had this little dot here and this, but I don't remember which one is means to start. So let's see. A fisherman died down the stairs, overwhelmed over fear of heights. So see that the little circle is the start and the line is the finish line. And here is number two. A nightmare seems like a creative failure trying to have a connection needed for exploration in recovery meeting. Not recovery meeting. And then here one, a German said just the opposite. Forgiveness and reconciliation was invited by a violent gathering detected by the Black Forest. So as you can see, it might not mean anything to you or even to me, but for me, it's about exercising the creativity of creating something else from that normality. Here is another one. It is the reader failed to locate the space and refuses to forge impossible violence. And I believe there's another one here that is, let's see. The wind prevails into this space of violence, depression outside in their time crevasse. Time crevasse. This one, number six, agony lifts up my hand again between life and death. Seven, her alter ego is made of Mara, yet her old femme background is Latinx and Hebrew. Number eight, death. I am, perhaps I could read a poem with sexual tension. Oh, number nine, there are so many. The city is the skin who inhabits a spiritual understanding to the shame companion from a miscarried child. And number 10, my mother seemed beautiful, which also filled the alphabet of humanness. And that's it for now. For that particular aspect of creativity, because continuing with this idea, I also created different books. So I'll share with you book number one, I think just briefly. And this is the folder of the book. I'm not going to show you each one because it will take me forever, but at least I'll show you. I asked a friend to do the visuals of this one. It's about anthology, and it's an anthology of different types of poetry that I have done for so long. Let me see if I can show you this one. Hopefully, yes. See? So it's like I'm using different ways of experimenting in the book number one that is already sold out, just so you know. This is some of the drawings from that book that I asked my other friend to do. I also did another book that is called The Awakening here. And you won't be able to see much, but it's also sold out. And I asked a different friend to do this one. And here it is, really nice. The Awakening, and it's sort of like idea of the pandemic, pre-pandemic, post-pandemic book about beyond the pandemic and sort of struggling with mental health issues. So some of the work that has been done with that book. And right now, the book is out. The other book is out. But I wanted to share. Here is the cover of the book is out already. I'm just trying to get more copies because when I saw it earlier this year, it's just out. But it's expanding beyond madness, and it's this idea of mental health issues and how can we expand beyond all of these things related to mental health issues, right? And let me close this because I wanted to share the last thing. One of the things that I've been able to do is to present my poetry in Toronto, in Chicago, here in Northern Ireland, in Belfast as well, and just a few ideas of how I've been able to present my work out there. And I can give you more and more examples of this, but just wanted to share first and foremost how poetry has been a healing experience for me. And initially I was intending to do more about this related to arts, but I guess I can come back later with other things related to music and the scribble art, but I feel like it's taking me longer to get there, and I rather keep it like that for now, so than you who are watching this video, you come with the next videos that I will be doing eventually about music specifically, and then scribble art and other type of experimental brute art. However, I want to wrap up today to say how poetry has been so helpful to me as a way to exercise this ADHD brain into the world. And it's so healing and therapeutic. I can tell you today that one of my personal exercises is that on a regular basis, I love sitting down at a cafe, get a coffee, sit down at the table, put on my headphones, listening to ambient music, and have my notebook and start writing and writing poetry. And that is so therapeutic because, as you know, with ADHD, all of these ideas come to you at all time, and then it's just a way of releasing this. So in Latin America specifically and other parts of the world, they have focused on art therapy or arte terapia, which is instead of medicalizing the person who has mild ADHD like me, how you channel all of these things to different types of art. So now I am exploring that avenue of ADHD, madness or math studies, and art, and how all of these can work together into countering the, I guess, hegemonic ways of dictating this normality that I was telling you earlier. Remember at the beginning when I was talking about disorder? So, how can we counter the idea that there is an order and then there are those who are in disorder or out of the order? So, for me, moving forward is looking at me first, but also how art, art brute, math studies or mental health studies or disability studies can help me understand all of these things as a way to counter the idea of the disorder, right? So I'm gonna leave it today like that because I don't want to take too much time on doing these things. I'll come back next time. I'm not gonna say when. I want to try to do once a week, but I feel like maybe more twice a week, but we'll see. Thank you for coming today to this second um, iteration of these videos and for being here with me today. I'll see you next time.